Okay, welcome back. Greg Grant here again today. And today we're going to change gears a little bit from opening boxes to talking about Wacky Pack history because there's a lot to talk about. I mean, I could go on forever about Wacky Pack history, and I will, but I got to start somewhere. So, in this first video, we're going to talk about the sometimes confusing topic of back variations. What is a back variation? Nowadays, for each front of a card, Topps intentionally makes multiple different backs. So here, for example, is a recent card from, I believe, 2020. And the same front came with two different backs. There was a puzzle back and a coupon back. Here is a card from the 91 series, card number 36. That here's the front on the left, and it had three different backs because they had a puzzle back, and then they also had a checklist back version. And since they pulled barfs at some point and replaced it with tattoo skins, there's two different versions of the checklist. So this front has three different backs. And sometimes the backing, they're just patterns. Like here, for example, is a card from 2015 series that has four different backs. One was a puzzle back. One was this pattern with camels that we'll talk about later. This one with characters. Here's two more with camels, just different colors. So sometimes they get carried away with this. It was between like 2015 and 2020 when they really got carried away with this and started making these gigantic series with thousands of variations. They haven't been doing that as much lately. So fortunately, because that's hard to keep up with when you make a website. Okay, so here is another example. It's just a color. It's just a straight up color option. White back, tan back. This is, however, a modern card. I mean, they did this on purpose. This picture here shows the most iconic of all back variations, this camel. And we're going to talk a lot about this. This is the so-called Ludlow pattern. These are modern cards with different colors. So how did all this get started? I mean, as you surely know, Wackies made the big time in 1973. They weren't born in 1973, but they made the big time in 73. That's when they were on the cover of New York Magazine and they were everywhere. I mean, that was the 1973 version of going viral. Wackies absolutely went viral. The first series came out in March of 1973, and sales and production ramped up so fast that it just literally caught the company by surprise. I mean, this is a big company. This is a company that makes baseball cards. I mean, they had a big operation, but they were new to stickers. They didn't have piles and piles of sticker paper laying around that they could use. But amazingly, sometime in 1973, Wacky Packs actually started to outsell baseball cards. This from Wikipedia. And they didn't want people to know that for some reason, but it came out in one of their court cases. So it was absolutely true. But that's a story for another time. So with demand going through the roof, before they knew it, every store was sold out and orders were backed up by the millions. And they really were printing millions. Here's a receipt from Topps from back in 1975 showing an order of 15 million checklists. So that's millions of packs. And 14th series was printed in vastly smaller quantities than first through ninth series when Wackies were really raging. Production really dropped after series 10, which is why those series are more valuable now. But even then, they were still ordering them by the tens of millions. Naturally, when the first series went viral, they went on a 24/7 printing binge. And the first cards they printed were on this white back sticker stock that looked like this. This is the back of a sheet of vintage 1973 Wacky Packs that was white. And in 1973, this was actually a new thing. I mean, I think it was apparently this new sticker stock that was the key to Wacky's success. Because, what most people don't realize was the same Wackies had already been released in 1967. And the only difference really was the type of paper. In 1967 and again in 69, they had this lick and stick kind of paper, like a stamp. And and those had limited success. Uh, and that's why they're rare. But apparently everybody was just waiting for the convenience of peel and stick, the peel and stick revolution, a new sticker technology, which in 1973 put Wackies on the map. Where would this hobby be if all they ever made was the 67 and 69 die cuts and Wacky ads? I mean, there wouldn't even be a GPK since the first GPK ever was itself a Wacky Pack. Here's the original art sold recently on Heritage. Okay, so Topps started off with millions of whiteback sticker sheets to work with. But with Wackies raging the way they were, they realized before the end of Series 1, they'd need more. So right away, they put in a gargantuan order for more paper. This time, for some reason, though, they switched from this whiteback stock to tan-back stock. Presumably, the tan-back stock was cheaper. I mean, it does feel cheaper. It's flimsier. It's thinner. So that's probably why they were probably bargain shopping, and they replaced the whiteback with tan-back, which you can see here. This is a picture of the back of a 13 series sheet, which had been folded, but that's just damage to the sheet. I didn't have a better sheet to give you a picture of. But anyway, it was 10. So while Topps waited for new paper, they were quickly pulling together Series 2, which was inspired by the Wacky ads, just like Series 1 was inspired by the die cuts. Here you can see. They just repurposed the Wacky ads to be stickers. And sometimes the bulk of the humor was in the background art, and that was all gone. But they knew it didn't matter. If they put out a Series 2, they knew it was going to be huge. Didn't matter. And most of them were so awesome because they were repainted by Norm Saunders, right? Norm Saunders didn't paint the originals, but he painted this. He painted the second series. And so guaranteed to be a success. Okay. So they received the tan-back paper sometime just around the time that they were printing the last batches of first series. And but soon, early enough that they did manage to print a small quantity of first series with tan-back stock. So the first series come both ways, the whiteback and the tan-backs, and the tan-backs are rare. They're not the rarest, but they're rare. There's hundreds of whitebacks for every tan-back. It really was done at the very end of the series. And it's funny, you could tell they were in such a rush to print at the end of first series when they printed these tan-backs because the quality on the tan-backs is terrible. I mean, a lot of them are badly miscut or parallel cut, which makes it even harder to put together a nice set of first series tans. I mean, to find a Pall Mall or a Band-Aid without the copyright in the wrong place is a real challenge. Here, for example, is doesn't, and the copyright is cut off. It's so common. Okay. Meanwhile, they're printing out, they're running out of their whiteback stock. They're waiting for the tan-back stock, and they're scrounging. And somehow they scrounged up a small quantity of this sticker stock that had some strange printing on the back. There were these camels and the name of a company called Ludlow. And they came in two types, permanent and removable. And the permanent were printed in red and the removable were printed in black. And they used them both. Apparently they had more of the black than the red. The reds are quite a bit rarer. I would say 5 to 1. The blacks are more common, but they're both very rare. If you come across a first series card with camels on the back, you've scored. Okay. So since Wackies were so popular, they went ahead and used this Ludlow paper, at least for a small quantity of first series. I remember back in January of 1998, when I first discovered Wackies online and discovered eBay, and I made my first purchase, which was a lot of first series, which turned out to all be these super high grade red Ludlows. But unfortunately, they had that wax stain residue on the front, and I didn't know what that was. You see it here? You see it on a checklist. You see these streaks. That's wax from the wrapper, and I didn't realize you could just wipe that stuff off. So I actually returned the cards. I returned a pile of beautiful red Ludlows because I didn't realize you could wipe that wax off. I'm still kicking myself. It's almost 30 years. Anyway, wax stains, that's another video for another day that I will do eventually. So let's get back to the topic at hand. The Ludlow pattern is actually complex, and it took a lot of assembling a whole lot of cards to figure out what it really looked like. But I believe this is what the full Ludlow back pattern looks like. It is a repeating pattern, but it's complicated. It's complex. It took a long time to figure this out, right? Because you have these triples, some go up, some go down, and then you have these singles, which are scattered about, and then each row is offset a different amount from the previous row. It's complicated. It took years to figure this out. So, by the time they finished with the first series, there were 4 types of backs. There was white backs, tan backs, black Ludlows, and red Ludlows. And that's pretty cool for collectors nowadays who love wackies and, or collectors are always looking for a way to make things more difficult. So there's a lot of territory here in the first series. I mean, that first series, Red Ludlow, was so rare. It was several years that I was into this hobby before the very first one had ever been turned up. The very first real one, I should say. And playing around with these long enough, I'm starting to wonder if there's actually not a third variety. It seems like the blacks almost always come one of 2 ways. They're either dark or quite light, like this, without a lot of territory in between. So actually, there may be like light and dark black Ludlows. Somebody needs to collect them both ways. Probably somebody has. So far, I don't know anybody distinguishing these, but I think they're 2 different things, and that's interesting. Now, if we want to get technical, there were variations even between different lots of white backs. There were so-called shiny backs, which are white, but they're glossy rather than matte, and they go for a bit of a premium. So, if you want to get technical, there are more than 4 or 5 or however many backs. They didn't just have one lot of white back sticker stock somehow. And here on the Wacky Pack webpage, there's a page with all the back variations of the first series, all organized in one place. This is one of those super cool pages, and there is one of the holiest of holy grails, the red Band-Aid Ludlow. But okay, let's move on to the second series. As they started printing the second series, they still had all 4 types of paper, white, tan, and a small quantity of red Ludlow and black Ludlow. And, that makes it clear that they printed the first Ludlows at the very end, or they surely would have run out and not had enough left over for the seconds. So for sure, they printed the first Ludlows at the very end and the second Ludlows at the very beginning. So for the second series, white and tan are both common. They still had quite a bit of white stock, and they're almost printed in equal quantities. I would say whites are a little more common than tans. Maybe it's 60-40, maybe it's 70-30, but not more than that. Maybe 65-35, but they are a little more common. You especially see it in those Runtonis. The tan Runtoni is definitely harder to turn up. And as with the first series, red Ludlows are definitely tougher than black Ludlows. So for the second, it's white and tans are equally common. Black and red Ludlows are rare. And Runtoni does come all 4 ways. So that's another proof that they were printed early because Runtoni was pulled relatively early. And you can see how these Ludlows vary. Like, look, dark, light, dark, light, light. They definitely come in 2 versions. And looks like the darks are more common. People generally don't like the lights because they think they're faded. Actually, I think that's a variation. But anyway, that's not for us to figure out today. Okay, so this brings us to the third series. And by now, all Ludlow stock was gone. Or, at least that's what everybody believes. I mean, we can't be 100% sure somebody one day won't turn up a third Ludlow. I mean, that would be amazing. If they found a few sheets left over and printed them, it's possible. But today, nobody's turned up a third Ludlow, so let's not hold our breath on that. But there was still some whiteback stock. They mostly ran out of their whiteback stock in the second series. but there was still a very little bit. And they quickly used it up in the third series. So there are third whites, but third whites are tough. They're some of the toughest of all variations. They're at least as tough as the red Ludlows. And incidentally, keep this in mind, almost all third whites seem to have been delivered to St. Louis or the St. Louis area. Whenever someone contacts me with a collection from St. Louis, I always get excited. It's funny because this week, two people mailed me collections from St. Louis, but one of them bought his Wackies in Detroit and the other in Chicago, unfortunately. But I mean, I've seen people from St. Louis and they just have incredible collections of back variations. So, there's a very interesting tidbit in the third series. There's this spit and spill variation that it comes with and without spick and span on the lid. That was an error. They didn't mean to print spick and span on the lid, so they removed it. And so it comes both ways. Here you can see the rare version, the so-called error card with spick and span, and the common version is with it removed. But they only used the white back sticker stock at the very beginning. And they only printed the spick and span error card at the very beginning. So for the longest time, we believed that there's no white back without the error. In other words, all error cards, all the fixed cards are tan backs. They didn't fix it in time to print white backs. And that's almost true. And in fact, it's not uncommon that people write me and think they found one. Let me show you an email here. Here, for example, is an email somebody sent me where they thought they had found a white back card without the logo on top, without the error, a fixed white back. And at first I was like, oh my God, score. It's priceless, blah, blah, blah. But then as I looked at it, you can see here, the die cut doesn't match up. There's a slanted die cut here. And here, it's not slanted. Slant is on the other side. So this is a restick. Someone peeled this card and stuck it on the wrong back. And that's usually what happens when someone contacts you and says they have this. However, I have seen at least 2, possibly 3 white back spick and spills without the spick and span on the lid that I believe were legitimate. There are several individuals in the hobby who, if they produced such a thing, we'd be sure it was fake. I mean, how hard is it to restick these cards? I know several people in the hobby who do things like that. It's easy to do, but it's easy to detect. But at least one guy I met who had a white back blank lid, A, did not know what he had until I told him, and B, he got it from Roxanne back in the early 90s for 50 cents. So that's a pretty good pedigree. I know Roxanne wasn't resticking stickers. This didn't look like a restick, and the guy didn't even know what he had. So unfortunately, he vanished, and I can't remember his name or how to get in touch with him. I don't know who he was anymore. This was years ago. But another guy showed up at the show not that long, 2 or 3 years ago, and showed me one. And I became convinced that one was real too. So I'm pretty certain they do exist. It's like the rarest of the rarest of 1 to 16s. I don't know anybody who has one in their binder, but it's a card that exists. I'm pretty sure. Nobody in the mainstream that I know has one to show off, but it's only a matter of time. For sure, in response to this video, several fakes will turn up. So be careful. So that's it for series 1, 2, and 3. And that brings us to series 4. And by series 4, now all the Ludlow stock was gone and all the whiteback stock was gone too. And all they had was tan. And they must have ordered a huge quantity because it lasted all the way up to the 14th series. So for 12, 11 series from 4 through 14. And there's no real noticeable batch differences like you would expect if they reordered. It's pretty consistent paper all the way through with a couple of exceptions, which I'll talk about. because every batch of paper you order is unique in some way. You can always tell one batch from another. So once they hit Series 13, they could see the writing on the wall. I mean, even though Wackies were waning, they weren't dead, and they knew they were going to be printing them for a while, and that they were going to run out of paper before Wackies finally breathed their last dying death. And Series 13 was getting close to the end, but it wasn't close enough. They knew they'd need more paper. So on this reorder, for some reason, they decided to go back to white back stock. No idea why, but there had to be a reason. And the white back stock was delivered extremely close to the end of the 13 series run. They did, however, run a very small number of white back 13 series sheets before switching to 14 series. So here is a picture of a 13th white and the common 1310. These are the uncontested, most difficult of all back variations. You almost never see them. They go for hundreds of dollars each. I think I've turned up in collections one in the last 20 years. I mean, that's how rare they are. And I get a lot of collections, so they are rare. I don't even know if anybody has legitimately completed the 13th white set. I mean, I know one guy who cut a sheet up. That's cheating. I don't know, like collecting them from the wild. I don't know if anybody who's completed that set. Okay, so that brings us to the 14th series. Now, like the second series, they printed both white and tan in pretty large quantities, making neither white nor tan particularly rare. However, there are definitely more whites than tans. But something strange happened in the 14 series that was similar to what happened in the first, in that they had a small quantity of something that we now call tri-fold stock. This is sticker stock with these lines going across the back, and they're unmistakable when you see them. It's not that easy to see them on a scan, but you can see it in this picture. There are these two lines that go across, and we call these tri-folds. And they're not as rare maybe as Ludlow's, but they command a definite premium, $15, maybe $20 for these cards. So for the 14th series, we have three variations: white, tan, and tri-fold. And now the 15th and 16th series were all white, no variations. So what series had back variations? First, second, third, 13th, and 14th. Just those five. The others didn't even have back variations. And that brings us to the end of the domestic vintage story. But we're not going to forget our friendly neighbors to the north in Canada. They printed Wackies too under a different trademark, OPC, but it's pronounced OPC. And in 1973, or maybe it was 74, they released versions of series 1 through 4. And for some reason, only 1 through 4. So I guess it wasn't as popular in Canada, or maybe they just started shipping Topps cards north after series 4. We'll have to ask somebody from Canada. But anyway, OPG cards also had back variations, though it wasn't as complicated as the domestics. There were no Ludlows, but they did have whites and tans. So here's Doesn't, first series OPG card, and you can see it comes with white and tan back. And curiously, the rarity is reversed at OPG. First, whites are tougher. In the domestics, the tans are tougher, but in Canada, the whites are tougher and the tans are more common. And then when it gets to the third series, it's the tans that are rare and the whites that are more common. Again, exactly the opposite. And there's no back variations in second or fourth series. It's just first and third. But these third tans are tough. I mean, it took me 10 years to complete a set of third tans. So second and fourth series OPG only come in tan. There are no back variations. It's just the first and the third series. Okay, and that's pretty much all there is to say about OPG. They stopped making them at that point. Now, that's the end of the vintage story, really. But there's a lot to say about the modern times. In modern times, Topps has capitalized on this whole Ludlow legend by making them intentionally. and short printing them intentionally. And they even made green and blue Ludlows and other colors just to get carried away. And now, actually, in the modern era, I mean, they make Ludlows, but they even make tan-backs. Even the tan-backs are artificial. So like here, I have a first series old school sheet, and you can see in the back, they've printed it tan. It's white back paper stock, but in order to make tan-backs, they actually printed tan on the back instead of having tan-back sticker stock. So not even the tan-backs are real anymore. But okay, let's get back to our story here. And now, everything is artificial and we've kind of gotten used to that, but there's still nothing like that feeling you get when you pull a real Ludlow and hold it in your hands. I mean, it's downright mystical feeling, especially a tough one like a red band-ache, affectionately known as a red ache. I recently pulled a black Ludlow band-ache from a collection, and there's a video on YouTube about that. There's another pretty nice band-ache, a little less well-centered, but really good condition. Oh man, please be a Ludlow. Please be a Ludlow. I pray to the god of Ludlows that this is a Ludlow. Oh, it's a Ludlow! I can't believe it. The greatest thrill of the year. So, anyway, that's the first time I ever happened on a band-ache Ludlow. I never happened before, and it'll probably never happen again. I mean, I've bought them, but that's the first time I ever stumbled on one. Okay, so now, if you want to take things to another level, and everybody always wants to take things to another level, you can actually find Ludlows, vintage Ludlows with 1, 2, 3, 4, and even 5 bits of camel on it, right? So here, this picture shows a Ludlow with 1 camel. This one has bits of 2. This one has 3. This one has 4. And this one actually has 5. There's a little corner here and here, 1, 2, 3. This is the max. So try to collect a complete set, of red Ludlow, first series Ludlows with 5 camels. Never been done. So, who says there's not lots more territory to take this hobby in? There's always more territory. And here on the Wacky Pack webpage is a page that organizes all the vintage back variation information about the different series. There's pictures of every single card. It's quite an effort. And this phenomenal page, which will take a second to load because there's so many pictures on it, has every single vintage tan and Ludlow and white back and tri-fold of every series that had variations, all on one amazing page. So make sure to check those out. I'm just noticing those light black Ludlows only seem to appear in the second series. I don't see any of them in the first series. And there's another thing let's take a moment to point out. Notice how the camels sometimes go to the right, like this one, sometimes go to the left, like this one. So that's another variation that you can collect. And so this is right, left, 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 left. Here's another right. As you can see, the rights are far tougher than the lefts. So if someone could collect a complete Series 1 black Ludlow pointing to the right with 5 camels on each, that would be the ultimate of ultimates. Just goes to show you there's always more territory. Okay, so let's talk about the evolution of modern Ludlows. Topps started making artificial Ludlows around 2011, and I believe it was Old School 3 was the first series, and they started with black. And so this is an Old School 3 sticker here with a black Ludlow. And then in Old School 4, they did red. And they got it right. right? This one says permanent and this one says removable. And that's how it should be. And they even mixed it up. They had different backs. So like here we see a bunch of different Ludlows from the third old school, and there's different numbers of camels on them, and everyone is kind of different, just like vintage. Then, for some reason, in old school six, they started making all the backs look the same, right? They stopped mixing it up. It's the same pattern on every back. They got lazy about it. People don't like that. And they also removed the word remove permanent entirely from it. I mean, maybe some lawyer told them they better remove the word permanent from there because that just sounds scary, permanent. And then in ANS 10 was the first time that they actually printed red and black in the same series. But notice now they all say removable. They did properly mix up the backs again. It wasn't until a little later that they finally abandoned this altogether. And so when they started doing this in ANS, they did at least continue to mix up the backs. They didn't do what they did in old school six here, but that wouldn't last for long. But it did persist through ANS 11, 2014, 2015. And in 2015, they actually introduced two new colors, blue and green, and they all continued to say removable. And for some reason, on the blue Ludlows, they put blue borders, right? They didn't put red borders on the red Ludlows and green borders on the green, but they put blue borders on the blue Ludlows. So somebody was getting creative. In the Chrome series, they did it again, but now they replaced permanent and removable with refractor. Well, at least somebody was paying attention. And now it's not clear to me, are these gold Chromes, gold Ludlows, or is that red? I'm a little bit color challenged. It looks red to me. But notice these are rare cards. They're numbered. They only made 25 of each title. This one here is numbered, 21 of 25. But anyway, I would say the most disappointing change in the modern Ludlow craft was to make all the backs the same like this. I mean, at this point, Ludlows have lost a lot of their charm. I like to call these monoculture Ludlows. And later, the later old schools, MLB movies were all monoculture. And then there were the attacky packages, which of course always have their own take. So the attacky packages were done like this. They created a new back and called it a Crudlow. So since 2020, they've actually started phasing Ludlows out. ANS stopped having them. Attackies didn't have them anymore. The weekly monthlies didn't. And it seems old school is the only thing holding on to the tradition at this point. So maybe the Ludlow era has finally come to an end. Okay, so now that we got all the academic stuff out of the way, now it's story time. I'll tell one back variation story. So it's about 20 years ago, and Phil Carpenter calls me and gives me a lead to a guy in New Jersey. Phil's in Texas, I'm in Philly, New Jersey's in my neighborhood. So he gives me a lead on a guy with a full first or second series box. We didn't know which series it was because they're in the same wrappers and in the same box. Second series box often has a sticker on it that says second series, but not always. So we really weren't sure. So I got the guy on the phone, and indeed he did have a purple box full of red packs, and we just needed to figure out what series they were. So I'm walking him through it. I'm like, try to find a pack where you can read any word through the wrapper. Just any word. Just find me one word, not the word the or and, but like most any word, and I could probably pin it down. And it took him a long time. I mean, he was scrutinizing and bitching and moaning. This was a guy with a little bit of an attitude, and he was a bit high strung and difficult. And didn't, but he realized he had to do this. And eventually, after what seemed like forever, he's like, okay, I can make out one word. And I said, okay, what is it? What's the word? And he said, okay, I'm pretty sure it says removable. I was speechless. I mean, it's like long silence while I tried to compose myself. And before I could speak, he said, is that better? Is that better? And I mean, all I could say was very meekly, yeah, that's better. So I had to tell him what he had. And with some more effort, we figured out it was a second series. So he had a full box of second series Ludlows, and we may arrange some like $5,000 for it. And we were going to meet at a gas station somewhere in New Jersey. And we did. We met. And he shows me the box. And I'm looking at it and it feels a bit light. So I count the packs. 36, not 48. And I'm like, dude, this box is 12 packs short. And he got real mad right away. He's like, that's impossible. And he took it from me. And I'm like, count the packs and look on the box. It says 48. And inside there's 36. I'm not a magician. And he had to admit that the box was missing 12 packs. And he was like, thank God we met in person. Because if he'd mailed it to me, he said, there's no way in hell he'd have believed me that that box was short. So I guess he never even counted the packs to begin with. He just assumed it was a full box. And 36 packs do stack evenly in 4 piles of 9. Anyway, selling those packs was a lot of fun. And they're still out there somewhere. At least I assume nobody would open any. But you never know. There are some shameless pack killers with too much money and no respect for sealed packs. So you never know. But I know quite a few of those are still out there. I know some people who have them. All right, so that's it for now. Thanks for watching. And please hit that like and subscribe button. Please leave comments. It all helps. It helps the algorithm. And I'll see you in the next one because there's just so much more to talk about. It's a big, deep, and wide Wacky Pack universe out there. And until then, I love you all and hit that subscribe, and I hope to see you back.